What's up, everybody? Merry Christmas. The very special Badlands Other Guys crossover episode you've been waiting for. Joe Caporoso, I pronounced your name wrong the first time. Paul Kilgannon. My God, I'm sorry about that. I want a caveat here. We're recording this Friday morning. So we have no idea what's going to happen in Jets Washington. We're not going to talk about it. They could win 49-0. They could lose 49-0. This episode is pure Christmas morning podcast, nostalgia, reminiscing. Paul's going to throw as many random games at me as he can from the drought era to test my mush jet brain memory, which keeps popping up in podcasts. Then we're going to talk about some of our favorite memories from going to games, meeting people associated with the Jets. It's going to be positive stuff. I don't want to talk about Trevor Siemian and whatever the hell happened at MetLife. We covered that in post-game party or therapy. I don't even know if there's a party or therapy for that game. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, Paul, our first time podcasting together. Other guys has been great. How you doing? How you feeling? And I'm sorry I butchered your name at the top like an idiot, even though my name is much harder to pronounce than yours.
All good. Been happening my whole life from, Little League getting announced to the plate up until now today. It still happens all the time. So no worries. Jake and I had to practice a bunch of times too. It's Kilgallen. It's all good. I'm feeling good. It's nice to live in a world where we're not stressed out about what's about to happen or what just happened, and we can just talk about some fun memories. So happy to be on. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We are officially just going to call you PK from now on. Going
Love
with
it.
the abbreviation. We got
Nice
Jets,
and
Jake,
easy.
PK, CR. Dan, short enough. We could just go with Dan. I'm ready. Hit me with some of these games. Could be any game from the drought era. There's a lot of random sadness in there. Because I was thinking about going into the Washington game. I was like, this game, man, there's 3 games left in the year. They're starting their 4th quarterback. They're playing a bunch of random players at this point because so many people are like injured. I was like, where is this even going to like sit memory wise among many other ones? And let's see if we could find a couple randos from our 13-year playoff drought. Because this one, 10 years from now, I'm sure we'll be talking about in a similar podcast. Hopefully not, but you never know.
So I'm excited to test out your brain here. I picked out a handful of games. There's a reason for each one I picked out, but sometimes it's a little more obscure than others. First one I'll give you, since we're playing the Commanders this upcoming weekend, is a 2015. So it's a memorable season,
Yep.
but not exactly a memorable game. So 2015, Week 6, October 18th, 2015. We got the 2-3 Washington Redskins visiting the 3-1 New York Jets. What do you got?
This was a home game for the Jets coming off the bye week, which they had because they beat Miami in London in their game before that. They won pretty comfortably. Cousins was Washington's quarterback, and he played like crap. Revis had an interception. That's mostly what I remember from it. It was a comfortable win where Revis had a pick and Cousins was really bad. And yeah, it was off the bye and off they beat Miami. And everyone was like, wow, the Jets actually might be pretty good this year. So that's my memory of that one. A good day at MetLife Stadium.
Yeah, impressive, actually. 34-20 win. Ivory went for 150 that day. Zach Stacy, Jet legend Zach Stacy, also contributed 50 yards that day. Fitzy had a rushing TD. Interesting note, Decker, Marshall both had a touchdown, a fumble, and a long of 35, which is just interesting.
How about
And
that
also,
offense?
yeah, what a fun offense. And other Jet legends, Crowder and Andre Roberts, were playing for the Redskins that day. So good.
I was actually at that game. I attended that game, and we could circle back around to positive attendance memories. It was a nice day, too. God, no rain like it was every day this year.
Yep. All right, second one I'm going to hit you with. I'm going to, go for a little bit of a different feeling here. 2011, Week 17, January 1st, 2012. The 8-7 Jets go to the 6-9 Dolphins.
So the Jets were still mathematically alive. They were 8-5 after I want to say they beat like Kansas City to get to 8-5. They got wiped by the Eagles, totally blown out in Philly. They had the Christmas Eve heartbreak to the Giants, and then this game, they were still alive. There was dependent on a couple other things. In the second half, they were driving for a chance to win. Because I remember there was a Tannenbaum quote after being like, look, we thought we were going to drive down, win, make the playoffs, and do our run thing again like we did in 2009 and 2010. This is the game where Wayne Hunter and Santonio Holmes got in a fight in the huddle late in the game. Jets did ultimately lose their last 3 and go to 8-8. Although it was a game that, again, they had a chance to win in the second half. But the one that sticks out from this one was the fight in the huddle with Holmes and Wayne Hunter, and capping really the true end of that like Rex Ryan era. It really ended with the Victor Cruz play, but this was a game that I think it shook out where even if they won, they wouldn't have gotten in. But there was like a stretch there where like if they won and Houston lost, they would have been like the 6th seed, I think. So I think they lost by 1 possession, but a depressing one in Miami.
Yep, lost 19-17, close down at the end. Reason I brought it up was the Santonio Holmes quitting incident in the fight that happened in the huddle. One interesting note, who was the interim coach for Miami that day? Miami had fired their coach earlier in the season.
Was that? I'm assuming that's the year they fired Philbin, probably. So then who was the interim coach? Dan Campbell.
Todd Bowles.
Really? That's a good That's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, so now we're going to go to another barn burner. 2012, Week 13, December 2nd, 2012. The 4-7 Cardinals at the 4-7 Jets.
This is the McElroy game. McElroy,
Yep.
Lindley, Jeff Cumberland, the only touchdown in the game on the 1-yard boot, 7-6. An all-time historic game. Sanchez on the sideline with the notepad, taking the notes with the pencil after he had finally gotten benched. And I think Kerry Rhodes might have had an interception in this game too. I'm trying to think this is way back. I mean, it was just the ugliest of ugly games. The Jets do win this one, and then Sanchez does end up playing again before the season ends. I think
I think Sanchez played the next week, and then eventually they went back to McElroy.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure the next week they played the Titans in primetime. And if they won that game, they would have been like very alive. I know they had a game down the stretch that year where they played and lost to the Titans in primetime, where Cumberland also had a touchdown. Only guy who was scoring touchdowns that year. And then McElroy started like a sad game at home against the Chargers after they had brought Braylon Edwards back. Depressing loss. And then Sanchez finished the season out playing in Buffalo, and they lost like 30-9 or something. 2012, depressing season. But that's an all-time pathetic game. I think so. I think this Washington game could very much mirror it if it's Simeon versus Brissett or even Simeon versus Howell.
Bingo. Good call outs all around. I remember I texted a guy that I had been friends with in high school that also had season tickets. I texted him after that game just that the Greg McElroy era had begun.
Yes. I mean, McElroy to Sims, it was like Matt Sims when Gino got benched for him. There's like this little stretch of thinking these like late round quote unquote heady quarterbacks could solve the Jets' problems, and they were both just so bad.
Yep. All right. Different look at this next one. 2014, Week 2, September 14th, 2014. The 1-0 Jets at the 0-1 Packers.
Oh man, this killed their season, right? They won Week 1. There was some good expectations going into 2014 because they were better than expected in 2013. They win Week 1 against the Raiders. This game they're up, I believe it's 21 or 24-0. Gino has like that 4th down dime to Decker for a touchdown. I think he ran for a touchdown. Ivory gets in. So they were up 21 or 24-0 at halftime ish. And then they blew the lead. And this is the game where they threw the touchdown to Curley, but I think it was Wilkerson or Sheldon Richardson called timeout by accident. And it got like wiped off the board and they lost. And they never recovered from that loss. Like if they win that game, I'm curious to see how 2014 plays out, but that killed them. Brutal loss in Green Bay to our dear friend Aaron Rodgers.
Yep, you hit pretty much everything. I watched like the quick highlights last night. Rodgers fumbled the opening snap. Sheldon Richardson recovered it. Rushing TD by Gino right after. And then that was definitely a game where we were all like, maybe we have something here with Gino. And you're right, they collapsed. They ended up going down 31-24, and then the timeout was called by Marty Morningweg and then reinforced by Sheldon Richardson. Sheldon Richardson grabbed the ref and said, hey, we're calling timeout. And then there was video right afterwards of Rex saying, I didn't fucking call timeout.
Yeah. I think Wilkerson got thrown out of this game too. Something
he did
happened
for a fight.
He got tossed out. This is a brutal. And Gino was awesome in that first half, and then it was just he couldn't like stay consistent the rest of the disappointing.
All right, next one I got for you. I'm going to give you a choice, or we can do both. It's going to be 2 2018 games. I'll give you either Week 6, October 14th, 2018, the 1-4 Colts at the 2-3 Jets, or we can go Week 16 Packers at Jets.
I mean, I could do both. The
All
Colts
right,
game,
so let's start with the Colts.
Colts game they won and won comfortably. I think Morris Claiborne had a pick six like right in the beginning of the game, and the Jets won and got to 3-3. Darnold would they kicked I think the Jets kicked 6 field goals. Morris Claiborne had a pick six. They only scored one offensive touchdown, but they won pretty comfortably to get to 3-3. And everyone was like, all right, the Jets might be like a wild card team this year. They're better than we thought with a rookie quarterback. Defense was better than we thought. Obviously, that's when Sam started fall off a cliff and had that ugly game in Miami, and then he was hurt, and then the season was over. The Packers game is the one that the classic late season great game from a Jets young quarterback that everyone carries over to the next year. They lost in overtime to Rodgers, which was ultimately good for the tank at the time. But Darnold was great in that game. He threw a couple touchdowns, I think, to Chris Herndon. Herndon had that one-handed catch. Oh, Herndon's a star. Here we go. And that was back-to-back with the Houston game in primetime too. Both games where Darnold looked good. And it was all right, there's something here, even though they weren't winning any of these games. So those are relatively recent enough where I remember all the details about that. But yeah, the Colts one, remember, was a tip pass and Morris Claiborne ran it back for a touchdown early.
So, yes, you're right on everything you said. I'm going to hit you with a couple questions. Who were the starting 3 wide receivers in the Colts game?
I'm trying to think. So it had to be, if it was 2018, Jermaine Kerr should have still been on the team. So he was probably one. Did they? God damn it! Who was the other guy? Robbie should have been one of the starting receivers, right?
Yep,
Still at that point, Robbie Anderson. I'm trying to remember if they carried. They still had they didn't have Curley anymore at that point. He was gone. So it was Anderson, Curse.
The third one is the one who scored the touchdown.
God damn it!
And it's a name. It's the reason I'm asking you this question.
Shit. Who scored a touchdown in that game? I don't know. I can't. Actually, you got me on this one.
Former quarterback Terrell Pryor.
Whoa. Terrell Pryor. Right. Who could forget Terrell Pryor's Jets career?
Yep.
Didn't he also quit in the middle of the season or get cut in the middle of the year?
Yeah, he quit, got cut, and then went to Buffalo, I think. I
remember, and I was guilty of this too. I remember around that time there was a big talking point that the Jets had 4 receivers on their roster who had at least had 800 yards in a season, and I think Pryor was one of them because he randomly had one good year. And yes, he was this big target. Man, wow, that's a deep cut. I forgot Terrell Pryor was on the Jets.
Me too. Until I was going through this stuff. So a couple notes on the Packers game. Rodgers threw for 450 in that game, which is absurd.
Tom Bowles defense.
Yep. He had 2 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns, lost in overtime. You're right. Andre Roberts had a kick return touchdown. The game notes from that game say Robbie Chosen, which I thought was interesting because his name was not Robbie Chosen yet. And the other 2 things I thought were interesting. Eli McGuire was the leading rusher for the Jets that day. And
everyone loved Eli McGuire.
Yep. And Rontez Miles had a rushing attempt. I don't remember it.
Fake punt had to be.
Fake punt? Okay.
Yeah. Special teams ace. He was always the fake punt guy for 5 years. Yeah, Eli McGuire, 2017 and 2018, having random moments as a Jets cast off day 3 running back. A better version of LaMichael Pirine.
Yep, 100%. So that's all the games I pulled for you. I didn't want to go anything too recent, so that was a very impressive performance there. You do have a special brain.
Yes, that's a good way to describe it. It's a polite way to describe it. All right. We'll always come back to this every few months with tests on the drought years. Eventually, we'll go back a little further and see how long I could go. All right. Second segment, I lobbed your way. We're going to talk about our favorite experiences of going to Jet games. I was thinking of this because I did this a little bit on the 12-pack where, I was coming back from the Jets-Falcons games, which was just about as a miserable of experience in stadium as you could get. Before the game was great to hang with everyone. In stadium was just a nightmare. And I was thinking, I used to go to games all the time. I used to go to, 3 to 7 games a season. Peaking in 2015, well before I had kids, kind of still young-ish. I was 25-ish then. No, 20. I can't do math anymore. 27. I went to 7 of the 8 home games that year, and they were 5-2. So I saw them win 5 straight 5 home games that year. It was awesome. The Pats win, which was great. The Dolphins win, all fun memories. Since then, these are the Jet games I've been to. I went in the opener in 2016, which was a brutal loss that they should have won. I went to the Seattle game that year, which was an ugly loss, not even really competitive. 2017, I was basically actively rooting for them to lose, like even for early in the year. So I watched them beat the Jaguars in overtime, thanks mostly to Eli McGuire and Bilal Powell having huge days. So it wasn't that exciting. 2018, I didn't go to any games because that was the year my first kid was born. So it just like wasn't in the cards. 2019, I went to the opener against Buffalo where they blew the 16-0 lead, and that was it. I'd never go to a Gase game again because 2020, no one went to any games. 21, Zach's year, I went to the Titans game, which was actually awesome, like an oasis of a positive experience. Had great seats, bought him day of, and that was very exciting, that game. 22, I watched them lose to the Patriots in person at home, which was brutal. I watched them lose to the Patriots in New England, which was brutal. Also, the year before, I watched them lose to the Patriots in New England. That's the game Mike White came in because Zach got knocked out. So all horrible experience in Jets-Patriot games, 3 in a row. And then, what other game did I go? I went to Jets-Bengals last year, too, where Flacco started. Also a horrible experience. This year, I went to the Jets-Bills opener, which I have talked about at length, but was a roller coaster of emotions, but at least they won. And then I went to this Jets-Falcons game. So it's been few and far between. It's been ugly. But if I go back to more positive experiences, in 98, I was at the playoff game when they beat Jacksonville. The confetti coming down. They were going to the AFC Championship game. It's the only home playoff game I've been to. There's not been a lot of options. That was incredible. I'll never forget that. I was at the game when they beat the Bengals to make the playoffs in 2009, last game in Giant Stadium. That was great. I was at the Vinny Seahawk game where they gave the Jets the touchdown, even though he was like a yard short. That was a fun season and a fun year to be going to games. 2006, I went to the Jets Raiders game where they clinched the playoff spot to get, in the Mangini year. God, I'm just riffing. And the two loudest games I've ever heard. 2009 week 2 when they beat New England, the first Rex win with Sanchez, and then 2010 week 2 when they beat New England again. Both those games, stadium were shaking. So those are all positive experiences. I was also at Jet Cowboy opener in 2011. So it used to be good. I used to have a lot of like good luck, and then it's just turned completely sour the past few years. And I try to be very targeted when I go to games. How about you?
Yeah, so you took 2 of mine for sure. So to give a little background, my family had season tickets from, I want to say it was about 1971, and we gave them up after 1 year in the new stadium. Just didn't like it, basically. In the old stadium, we sat in section 310, so we were on the Jets side, 13 rows up, kind of near midfield, close to the 50-yard line. So it was a great perch, around the same people every week. I grew up about 5 minutes from the Meadowlands. So like it was just a thing my family did. I was there, every week, for as long as I can remember until about 2010. And so, for me, it's funny you brought up week 1 this year. You brought up the 98 playoff game. So 98 playoff game in January of 99 was the first one I have down here. And that for me is the loudest I ever heard a Jets game. And I've talked to people who were at week 1 this year who have said that week 1 this year was louder. And I have a hard time believing it. It was so loud. And maybe it's just that I was young. Maybe it's that I was, 10 years old or whatever I was. And it's just loud in my memory. But like you said, the stadium was shaking that day. They hadn't been to the playoffs in 7 years. They hadn't hosted a playoff game since '86. So it was like a starved fan base. And this might be like a little bit too real for a fun podcast here, but my brother and I went to games together, and my brother and I had lost our father in like the years kind of leading up to that in '95, who took us to games, right? And then the kid that we sat next to, he lost his father in '98, right before the season started. Yeah. So like, then they make the playoffs, they go on this run, and then they win a home playoff game. We were all like tears in our eyes at the end. It was incredible. It was the loudest I've ever heard it. It was cold. The wind chill was, I think, in the teens that day. And at one point they were up big. I think the game finished pretty close, but at one point they were up big on the Jags, and it felt like the route was on and the party was
Yeah.
on, and so much fun, like
Yes.
outrageous amounts of fun. And I have a hard time believing that week 1 was as loud this year, but I wasn't there, so maybe it was.
Week 1, it felt like a college game because it was a night game and everyone had the lights, and it was very loud. It was the loudest Jet game I had heard in a while. I don't know if it was louder than 98. It's hard to kind of reconcile the two in my head. That game was so weird because everyone kind of knew in the moment Rodgers was done, and everyone was also like kind of getting ready to like leave at halftime or in the third quarter because it was so depressing. And then they had the Garrett touchdown, and everyone's like, all right, hold on. And it was actually like full, like all the way through into overtime. I think most people were like, this is probably like the only positive moment we're going to have from this season, so we might as well ride it out. And the Gibson walk-off was awesome. Like it was a nice little, like, for 15 minutes you could forget just how bad this is. Everyone in the stadium was trying to talk themselves into, he hurt his ankle, he'll be back after the bye week, but we all knew. We knew it was done. And the 98 story, we always get questions like I always get, I'm sure you're starting to see these come through now in Discord and Twitter, like, why do we do this? Why do we bother to do this? This team is miserable. Like, it sucks year after year. And it does suck year over year. Trust me. I get it. I talk about it every week. The reason this is not groundbreaking, the reason people hang on to being fans is the memories that you just described, right? You have that memory. You're like, great feeling you'll never be able to replicate. And it's like, how do we, as a fan, you're waiting year over year when you can have, moments like that again. Right. So that's what all it takes is one moment like that.
Yeah.
And you end up being hooked for life, even if it's 13 years. And look, within the 13 years, they've generally been miserable. There's been nice moments and memories throughout those 13 years of surprising wins. Those are the things that bring you back for more. Even recently, like last year when the Jets were 5-2 and 7-4, like, you're like, wow, like this is fun. They're winning every week. Like they're in it.
Yep.
Or you go to one of those games. So it's,
And
that's
I
what
was
gets you hooked.
And I was talking to Connor last week, and like he went to a lot of games when he was very young with his father too, and we were talking about like the smell of the parking lot at the Meadowlands, like the charcoal grills and all that stuff, and like it's seared into my brain, and that's the stuff that's created what I have today, which is like this sick attachment to this team or whatever. So the other two I listed here. So 2002, I'm going to give you like a combo shot here. The Week 17 game against the Packers. Everybody was listening to the Miami Patriots game in the parking lot on the radio.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Because we needed the right result in that game in order to have a win and so the Patriots ended up winning in OT, which didn't happen until we were in the stadium. They showed it on the screen. The place goes absolutely bananas, right? And then the Jets went out and pounded Favre 42-17. Favre actually got yanked after throwing an interception to Sam Garnes in that game, and Doug Peterson finished out the game. And so the interesting thing about that is that they had started 2-5 that year. And so I forget what time of year the Jets would generally try to collect for the playoff deposits, but it was at a certain point where it didn't look too good for us, right? So my family had decided not to put the deposit down on the playoff tickets that year. And so when we ended up winning the division and hosting a game, everybody, it was just like scramble mode. There's this story that like my uncle and my brother went down to like Jets headquarters in the city to basically like beg for tickets and whatever. So what the end result ended up being was that all of our crew was in different parts of the stadium. We just got a bunch of random tickets. I was 14 years old sitting by myself in like the lower bowl in the corner of the end zone. And I remember, and so that's the game that we just destroyed Peyton Manning. And he wasn't exactly Peyton Manning yet. Like he was still kind of like playoff choker. He was young. Yep. He was already a Jets enemy for what had happened with the Jets. We go out and beat him 41-0. I remember that Richie Anderson screen for like the 60-yard touchdown or whatever happened like right in front of me, left to right. And the place was loud that day too. So that combo of those two games was awesome. And then the last one I have is you brought it up already. The final game at the Meadowlands in Week 17 of 2009, freezing cold. So freezing cold. I think I drank like 1,000 beers just to try to stay warm that night. And it was a win and in situation, but it was over early. Like Brad Smith broke a 60-yard run on the first drive.
Yeah.
Yep. Scored on the opening drive, which I'm not sure has happened again since then. I don't think it has.
What does that feel like?
Yeah. And like the lasting memory for me of that game is that me and the guys we sat with, it was the last game at the stadium. They were tearing it down. We all
Yep.
kicked our seats off and took them home
Yeah.
with us, stuffed them in our jacket. I still have it.
There you go.
It's in my basement here. And when I was looking up that game last night, funny little thing. Do you know who the leading receiver for the Bengals was that day? Because Chad Johnson had 0 catches, 0 yards. He was locked down by Revis. Do you know who the leading receiver for the Bengals was that day?
God, like who was it? It was like TJ Hushmanzada, or it's like who were their other receivers at that point? Who was it?
Lavernius Coles.
Oh, I forgot Coles, that traitor. He had a touchdown in the
Yep.
playoff game the next week. The Jets were actually losing to the Bengals early in that one.
Yep.
And they kicked the crap out of them too, which was nice.
An honorable mention, last game I threw in, I don't have like a ton of memories to talk about, but that 2003 Steelers game where they just gave Curtis Martin the ball in the snow 1,000 times and he ran for like 175. Yeah, 6-0 final. So that was a fun one too.
The charcoal smell is a great call out. It's that and the shopping cart with the pretzels in it. Yes. Selling the pretzels outside of the stadium, particularly at the old stadium. I haven't seen that as much, but those were the two. It was also like, it's fun thinking back, like you go when you're like 10 to 14 and you remember going before you could start drinking. And then you get a little older. You're like,
yep.
I remember I would drive back from college, like cripplingly hungover, and like you drink to try to like warm up and stay through it. But that's obviously it's not part of what you do when you go younger. And then I've not decided, I'm not taking my kid to a game until he's probably like 7 or 8. He's 5 now. I'll test him out in the preseason game next year. I went to my first game when I was like, I think I was 6, and they lost to the Colts 9-6. And the only thing I remember cheering for was them downing punts inside the 10-yard line. So if I could survive that memory, then I'm assuming even if he goes to a bad starting game, then he'll enjoy it. But I got to give him a couple more years. Also, like, I'm sure everyone says this. It's just like a generational thing. Like, it used to be better and more fun going to games than it is now. That's always a factor of winning, though. All right, last prompt before we wrap. Talking about any favorite memories of meeting Jets or meeting anyone associated with the organization. Main one that always comes to mind for me is when I was going into my sophomore year of college. I had an internship with CBS News in the city. And it was whatever. I was like a page, run around, do errands for everybody, Hannah Storm and whoever else was on the desk back then. And one day, this was after Curtis Martin had like randomly announced that he was going to like participate in some type of like ownership group thing, whatever it was, he was there. And as part of the project we were doing, I got to like interview him before and meet him. And it was just like an intern project. Everyone knew I was a big Jets fan, so they like set it up where I can do it. So I got to like sit and interview with him for like 20 minutes. I was incredibly nervous. It was an interview for nothing. It didn't air anywhere, but he was so nice and so patient with a shaky 19-year-old version of me. And then I went to something at the Jets headquarters in the city after where he just like sat around the table with all the beat writers. Samini was there, of course, as he's been a beat writer for 76 years. And he just like answered questions. So it was like experience of basically being like a beat writer for a day, something I've never done and never will do, but it was interesting in doing that. I got to interview Mangold. There's still a video kicking around our YouTube channel of it a few years after. It was like a partnership we had done with MetLife through the old Turn on the Jet site. I got to interview him in the city, which was fun. Just like a few questions in person. And just meeting him in person was very cool. Way back in the day, this is not quite as cool as exciting. The Jets used to do this where they would bring in like different like podcasters and people. We got to like record videos for the team website. I got to meet like Neil Glatt, who was working for the team at the time. It was like an executive. They asked like random questions. Those were cool experiences, getting to go into the building, shoot content. Those are the ones that come to mind the most for me. The Curtis Martin one is the top one. I also saw Revis at Ainsworth in the city after he had like came back to the Jets in 2005. But I was at that point where I just kind of went up, high five, handshake, how you doing? Also Darnold more recently. I went to the Super Bowl for Rams Patriots in Atlanta. And as part of it, I was hanging out in the Super Bowl house before. I'm actually going to the Super Bowl this year too, by the way, which is going to be fun. Thank you, my buddy at the NFL. We were hanging out in the Super Bowl house, and like people pass through all the time. And Darnold, this was right after their rookie years. So keep in mind what everyone's perceptions were still. Darnold and Josh Allen came in together, and they were like friends. They were either like their girlfriends or significant others at the time. First off, they're absolutely enormous in person, especially Josh Allen. And they were playing like shuffleboard in the corner for like an hour. I was watching, of course, with a bunch of other people. Josh Allen kicked the shit out of Darnold, and it should have been an early tell that Allen was going to be better than Darnold. But I did get to go up to him after and shake his hand and say what's up. At the time, of course, it was like, this was awesome. And then, of course, the most recent one, I ran into Elijah Moore at Baja Mar on vacation with my friends and ran routes against him, and he literally picked me up and jammed me at the line and knocked me over immediately. There isn't video of it, but I did get to throw a pass to him after that. His trainer ran a route on him, like a deep post, and I hit it perfect, and I beat him on that. So I know it didn't end well for Elijah with the Jets, but I like him because he was very nice in person and was very nice and gracious to everybody there. So I can't say a bad thing about the guy, because when you actually meet someone in person, it hits a little different. And that, those are my recent collection of Jet memories that come to mind.
And when it's a positive experience, it really changes a lot. Like, because
Yes.
it can move it in both directions, right? Like it can really ruin somebody, or it can really kind of elevate them. And you're right too. It does change a little bit when you're an adult. Like when you meet a pro athlete when you're a kid, it's a little bit of a different experience than when you're doing it as an adult. There's a little bit of like, hey, like, I know this is a little weird, but here's whatever. So the two I have are, 97 training camp at Hofstra. I don't remember how it happened, but my brother and I won some kind of tickets to like an event at training camp. I don't know if it was like a radio contest or whatever the deal was. Like, I can't remember, but we had tickets to go out to Hofstra, and part of the deal was that we got to have lunch with the team. And so I met like a handful of the players. The one that sticks out in my head is Hugh Douglas, just because he was so big and I was 10 years old, and he was huge, right? And there's a picture of like us, him with his arm around me, and I'm like, I'm not even up to like his hips. And but the lasting memory of that day is that my brother and I sat down for to eat food at this lunch or whatever, and we sat at a table by ourselves, because we're very much not like those kind of people who's going to be like in these guys' face. Like they're in two-a-days. Like it's like, like we're very much just kind of like hang back people.
Yeah.
And so we're hanging back and we're eating lunch by ourselves, and Wayne Corbett walks over. He had hurt his knee that day in practice, so he had like a stim machine hooked up to his knee. And he was like, hey, do you guys mind if I sit down? And he just sat down with us, and he just talked to us like a normal dude for probably about an hour. And he just hung out like a totally regular guy. And like, to your point, like Wayne Corbett is gold forever in my book. And not only because he was a target monster and he was awesome for us for several years, but, that's part of it too. And so, he can kind of do no wrong. And then the second one, 2018, I'm an adult now. I was at the US Open at Shinnecock Hills out on Long Island. And I was like shopping in the merch tent, just like kind of doing whatever. It was the beginning of the day. And I just like looked up, and Sam Darnold was right there. And he had never played a snap. He hadn't even signed a contract yet. Like it was fresh. It might've been his first appearance in New York City. And so like I felt real weird about it, because like at this point now I'm older than this guy, and like it was like a strange dynamic. And I was like, hey man, like I'm embarrassed to do this, but like, can we just take a quick picture? Because I thought like it's over for us. Like this is it. We finally got him. We got it. Right. Yeah. And so, I took the picture. He was cool. He chatted for like 30 seconds to a minute. It was real quick. We took a picture together. I posted the picture on Instagram, and I went and looked at the picture last night just to verify the date. And my brother-in-law, who is a Patriots fan, commented underneath the picture at the time, can't wait to send you this picture when he's in the CFL.
He's cold but true. At least not in the CFL, but yes.
Luckily, it hasn't happened yet, but it might happen someday. So,
oh man, I mean, look, whenever that new quarterback's drafted, there's always that glow in the first few months where you're like, well, this is the one, this is the guy. Shit. Well, a good 34 minutes of hopefully easy listening for Jet fans. Whatever happened in the Washington game yesterday, we have plenty of other time to talk about it. We'll have War Room back on the feed Tuesday, pod Wednesday. I'm looking at the schedule now. I think when's the next other guys is hitting. We have a bit of a funky schedule now because of Christmas, but there will be another other guys that hits before the end of the year. As always, there'll be stuff on the feed every day. Paul, PK, thanks for hopping on and doing this. Take notice of this ridiculous sweatshirt I got. I actually got this from Scott Rogowski, the guy who used to host God, what's the name of it? I'm forgetting the name. What was the daily trivia show? that used to be on. Regardless, he runs a thrift shop of throwback gear right now, and I got this from him.
Oh, nice.
So this is where I got the sweatshirt from. Everyone enjoy your Christmas. And we got like Jets Browns in like 48 hours. What's more exciting than that? Primetime football, baby. We'll talk to everyone soon. Thank you for listening.